Aloha and welcome to this screencast on meteor-application-template-react. We're going to look at form processing in this video. And the interesting thing here, the important thing, well, let me start by first saying here's a form. Here's another form. You can see they're extremely simple. For this one, we're going to, if we try to submit, it's going to do some error checking. And so if we say we want to add a foo item, and there's 23 of them, and the condition is poor, and we submit, we see that the add succeeds. And then if we go to list stuff, we can see we have this, this item now in our collection. We can click the edit button to go to a page, and the URL is kind of named with the doc ID of this. That's how we know which document the ID of the document we're supposed to be editing. And here it is, and we could change it to food, for example. And if we submit that, we get the fact that the update succeeds, which means we can now go to list stuff, and it now says food rather than foo. Okay, so there's just a couple forms in this system, and let's see how we do it. I want to note that we use this package called uniforms for our form development. And you can read through this, and the notion here is that it's got a style for semantic UI, which is nice. It's integrated with Meteor and simple schema, all good things, and then you can get some extremely simple looking code to automatically generate forms where you pass it a schema, and it basically tries to do the right thing. What I'm going to show you in this is a marginally more complicated one, not much more complicated, but the notion here is that we'll create an auto form using this uniforms package. We'll pass the schema, which it uses for constraint checking and so forth. But then inside, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of manually lay out what we want the form to look like. And I think in general that's good to do, just so that you're not always having to constrain yourself to the automatically generated form, and it's not that hard to do. So let's take a look at this, and what we'll see, we'll look at the add stuff form first. And the notion here is that we have this add stuff page, and the page, the way it's going to happen, the way it's going to be rendered is we have a semantic UI grid, which is a centered container. Let's actually go back here, and so we can see what we're looking at. Here's our add stuff page. Okay, so we've got the header here. We've got a segment, which creates this little border, and then we've got the 3 fields of our form and a submit field. So let's look and see how that's implemented. We have grid, container, center. The container provides some margins. It's a grid. We've got one column in this grid. We've got our header right there, which is an H2, and then we have our call to auto form. And basically, we're going to say here's the schema to be used to figure out the constraints on our fields. When the submit button is pressed, we're going to invoke this method up here, and then the way we're going to lay it out is this segment object inside. We've got one text field, that's our name component. We've got another one for quantity. I could probably make that some kind of numeric field. That's an interesting thing to do. And then I've got a pull-down list select field for our condition, which can be excellent, good, poor, fair, etc. And then a submit field, which is our submit button. And then if there are any errors, we're going to put them underneath. And then we've got this text field, which is a hidden field. And we get it to be hidden by saying type equals hidden, label equals false. And we provide basically a fake value, which is a fake user. And that's because before autoform, when you try to hit submit, autoform is going to check to make sure that all of the required fields exist in this form and they have valid values. And if we look at the API, we notice that we have this username it has to be present because optional is false, and it's of type string. So in this form, we actually in the submit method is where we actually figure out the username that we want to pass into the insert call, which is after this form has returned. So the way I'm kind of getting around that is creating some dummy text right here, just so that the validation of the form succeeds when AutoForm automatically tries to validate these other fields, and that's really nice that it does that. We just don't want it to get hung up on the fact that we don't at this point know who our user is. So we give it something that satisfies the constraints for that field. But what happens when we call submit is we're going to take the data, which is what is returned to us from AutoForm, and we do this destructuring assignment, so we get the name field, the quantity, and the condition. Those are these three things out of the data. And then we figure out what the username is by calling meteor user username, which is the standard way to do it. Then finally, we call stuff.insert, which is a standard Mongo collection insert call, and we pass it this document name where this is the kind of object notation where we'll say name colon and the value of the name variable. And then we pass a callback along with that. So, when we invoke this, what's going to happen is Meteor is going to go off and try to insert this into the database. And then if we pass a callback, which we are, the callback is going to let us know whether the insert succeeded or not. And generally, I think this callback is called with two arguments, an error, and then I think the doc ID or something if the insert succeeds. We just want to know whether or not there was an error. So we only look at this one parameter that comes back. If it's not null or if it's truthy, then what we'll do is we'll call this BERT alert. Okay, you can look up BERT alert. Let's see, BERT alert. Doggone it. Getting sidetracked here, but whatever. BERT alert. Okay, yeah, so here's a page that can tell you all about BERT alert, which is this, kind of silly little notification system. That was that little green bar that comes down, if I successfully add something, foo, 56, in excellent condition, and everything's okay, then I get this add succeeded. That's the BERT alert call. Okay. Anyway, whoops. If we go back to where we were and add stuff.jx, so this callback is going to either invoke a BERT alert saying that everything succeeded in the case that error is not truthy. Otherwise, if for some reason the insert fails, then we'll find out what the error message is. So that's how an add stuff thing works, and you can see, if you look, for example, in the sign up field, which does the more traditional form management, you have a constructor with properties. You bind this. You have this state value. You handle the change. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff here to fiddle around with. That is taken care of, kind of in the background by this AutoForm. AutoForm has some of its own little peculiarities that that you might run into, and if you need to, you can always back out and do it the more raw React way. But I think in most cases, this is pretty nice. You can write your forms really quick this way, and with a minimum amount of hassle. So that's form managing for add stuff. The other one is, if we go here, okay, now we have this edit where we are pre-filling the values of the fields with some data, and when we submit, we're actually going to update them. So let's take a look and see how that gets implemented. So for edit stuff, the first thing that's going to happen is we've got this code here. Again, this is a fairly standard Meteor thing where we are doing this higher order function with tracker. That enables us to get access to the underlying Meteor collections in a reactive way, and we're in the function that we pass in, we want to get the value of the match field that this gets invoked with, because that enables us from React Router to find out what the ID field was in the URL. And so if we go back to layouts app.jsx and we go up here, you can see for edit we have our URL constructed like this with edit and then this variable which is going to match whatever follows the edit. And so if we actually go to an edit, you can see we have this edit and then this piece will match that variable in the router, which is, nicely enough going to be the doc ID of the document that we want to fill these forms with. So given that, what we need to do is find out, well, we pass through the router, we find out what the URL is, we're going to invoke this edit stuff page. How do we figure out, how do we get access to that parameter from the URL? Well, this is the way you do it. You get this match variable from the arguments that are being passed here, and match.params._id is going to be, this particular field. Now that we've got the document ID, then we can we can subscribe to the stuff collection, and we can do we can call stuff.find1 with that document ID to get that specific document, and that will now be a parameter available to us in the page. Plus we have this ready field, which is our standard thing to make sure that our subscription succeeds, and it will kind of repaint the page when the subscription is ready so that things match up. Okay, so that all makes sense. And so then we, as I said before, the actual render is going to basically look at our ready variable and say, is the subscription ready? If it is ready, then we'll actually render the page, which is the code here. Otherwise, we'll just display this loader thing, which is a semantic UI spinner. Okay, so we're going to render the page once the subscription is ready, which means also that our doc parameter, or property, I'm sorry, is going to be the object that results from calling find1 with document ID. We assume that this document ID is okay, and then we call render page. We've got a grid that's centered. It's a container. It's got some margins. We've got a single column. We've got the header. All of this kind of looks the same. In fact, this looks almost identical. In fact, it is almost perfectly identical, except for the fact that we now pass this model property in, which is the value of the doc property, okay, which is the actual document that we want to display. So uniforms, the difference between the add stuff one and the edit stuff one is kind of literally only the addition of this model value. Now it turns out there's one other small change. We don't need to provide a value for the username field, because in the case of edit stuff, the username, we're going to get that value from this actual model object. Okay, so it'll get the actual username value. So that's how that works. And then on submit, what is going to happen is that we will get this data. Uniforms is going to pass the value of the model as an argument to submit, which is very convenient, which enables us to basically get all of our fields out of this data object, and then we can call our update rather than insert Mongo call, passing first the doc ID and then a set object, which enables us to change the value of name, quantity, and condition. And then we've got our standard callback function, which checks to see if there's an error, and if so, we'll do our little bird alert notifier. Otherwise, we'll say that the update succeeded. So that's the add stuff and edit stuff. I think that's basically all you need to know about forms. And you can look at the various import statements to see how we get this stuff in. Uniforms has other kinds of capabilities. You'll have, if you're doing things outside this kind of standard stuff, you can look at uniforms to see more advanced uses. But hopefully this will give you enough to go on for now.